Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mike Gibb. I run accountsrecovery.net, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar where we're talking about how to get from burnout to buy-in, how agent experience directly lowers delinquency. Today's session is going to zero in on frontline realities, the challenges that collectors are facing, because it's more than just one, where traditional playbooks break down, and which agent-centric tactics are already impacting recovery rates and compliance. What we're going to cover today is the rise in delinquency. We're going to cover how the clarity of your goals, bite-sized coaching, and real-time feedback transforms stress collectors into motivated problem solvers. We're going to talk about some retention economics, and we're going to develop a collector-focused playbook, including a three-step framework, you can roll out as soon as next week or today to lift engagement and recovery rates in parallel. Today's webinar is being sponsored by Centrical. You can learn more about them by visiting centrical.com. Let me introduce you now to our panelists. Michael Ciancio serves as the Chief Marketing Officer at Centrical, bringing decades of experience in marketing and go-to-market strategy. In this role, he leads the company's global marketing efforts to drive brand growth and market expansion. Prior to joining Centrical, he held marketing leadership positions at notable technology companies, including Intellipeer, Infor, and Vonage. His strategic vision and leadership continue to be instrumental in advancing Centrical's mission to transform how organizations engage and motivate their frontline teams. Blair DeMarco Wetlaufer is the Managing Director of Kingstone Data Credit, an international collection agency. He's worked in the credit collections field for 35 years. He's trained more than 300 collection agents, registered businesses under ISO 27001 and SOC 2 certification, and worked with a number of companies as a partner and advisor to help them build better business. He also treats customers who owe debt with respect and courtesy, helping to remove themselves from collections and better their financial situations. A strategically minded business leader, Josh Schuberling, has been recognized throughout his career for valuable contributions at all levels of business operations. Josh is the current president of Lendly, a fintech loan origination marketing and servicing company. Over his 30-plus year career, Josh has worked for Fortune 500 companies, as well as large collection agencies and creditors' rights law firms. He was an early adopter of speech analytics, SMS to collect, scoring methodologies, and other collection technologies and strategies. Everybody who's watching us live today is absolutely invited to ask questions and submit comments during the course of our conversation. You can use the chat or the Q&A to submit your questions and comments. If you would prefer to participate anonymously, there's an anonymous button in the Q&A that you can push, and anything you send to us, I promise, is sent anonymously. All right, let's start with big picture. Let's look at the current sort of state of collections. I think we're seeing higher delinquency rates across the board right now. Maybe each of you, we can sort of talk it through and have the panel walk us through what they think is driving this surge and how it's maybe different from previous economic downturns. Josh, you're our veteran. You've done this before, and you signed on last. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to make you go first.
I should have known. That's always your MO, Mike.
It is, isn't it? There's got to be a benefit to being the first, one of the first ones, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, good first question to kick it off, and thanks for having me. I appreciate coming back. I've always enjoyed these. I think the simplest thing is we all know what's going on in the macroeconomics of the country, and wage growth has not kept up with inflation. The student loan coming back into delinquency. Cost of living is hitting people hard. It all results in people using more credit cards, and then obviously not paying them back and becoming delinquent, which, the cycles happen time and time again in my 30-plus year career, and we'll go through it. We'll get through it. But what's interesting about this time is as the economic burden continues to be tighter and tighter and harder on all the consumers, the flip side of that from the agency side, and I know we'll get into this, but the right party contact has become almost obsolete. And so when we're looking at this increase in delinquency and a complete shift in how we have to collect between the regulatory environment, the RPCs, et cetera, there's a lot to talk about today.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it, Josh. Blair, why don't you share your perspective on sort of what you're seeing more on sort of the collection side?
Sure. So obviously I'm a little skewed because I do collections on both sides of the border, Canada and US. During the COVID, everything was locked down. You couldn't go to the restaurants, you couldn't go to the bars. And Equifax put out a report saying that people under the age of 40 paid down like 30% of their credit card debt, which was great. And then they unlocked everything and people went on a revenge spending tour. and behaviors didn't change, to match the reality that the cost of going out for dinner had more than doubled. The cost of going out on a vacation had almost doubled. And so you have this pent up need to go spend money, and people are spending beyond their means. And now the debt levels, according to Equifax, are far surpassing what they were in 2020. And Josh is absolutely right. Consumer behavior has changed. Right party contacts are much harder to do by telephone and certainly by predictive dialer. And now consumers are better reached by SMS and email, but not everyone's set up to do that. And the regulatory environment can make that challenging. If you text somebody to their cell phone and you don't have compliance, well, now you're looking at a lawsuit. So you obviously want to use those modern tools, but we're in an uncertain environment, and we're building those strategies out.
Okay, excellent. Michael, let's get your perspective on sort of what you were seeing and maybe how, and talk a little bit about whether this downturn's different from any of the other, sort of previous economic cyclical downturns we've seen.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And again, Mike, everyone, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us. I think you're seeing, a lot of pain points in the contact center work for collections in general, but it's no different than the operational pressures that a contact center is seeing versus the consumer payment challenge that you're seeing on a regular basis, right? So there's a lot of similarity. Operationally, I would say you have rising costs to hire and retain collectors and agents, right, Blair? I'm sure you go through that on a regular basis. It's really hard to retain them. It's really hard to train them a lot. And you're starting to see that historically, but I think nowadays, especially with the addition of AI and how certain things are used from an implementation and use case perspective, you're seeing a different type of retention that we're going to talk about as we kind of go through it. So I think that's a little bit of what's different nowadays than prior from a financial aspect. They're going to be handling more and more complex cases. Obviously, the compliance pressures we talked about from a regulatory aspect on the operational side, but then throw in the curveball of the consumer payment challenges that you now have. It's, consumers are either unable or just unwilling at some point to pay, whether it's $100 or more. You have higher roll rates from the early delinquencies to charge-offs. You have increased broken promises to pay in varying different aspects because Blair, you and I were talking about this off stage before. You have aspects of leveraging AI bots outbound for a simple use case, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure people are much more willing to lie to a bot than they are to a person when it comes to breaking promises to pay, right? So your people and your agents really need to be trained accordingly. Their skill sets need to be up leveled wherever they can. And I think the environment is centered around something that's really, really interesting. And that's why I'm enjoying the topic today. So looking forward to expanding into it.
Delinquency rates up, RPC rates down. I'm curious, the interactions that you're having or that are being had with consumers, how are consumers responding? How are consumers when you are engaging with them, how are they engaging? Are they more upset, less upset, more angry, less angry, more willing, less willing than say they have in previous cycles? Just sort of, what's the consumer sentiment out there that you're seeing and hearing and that the agents are dealing with on a daily basis?
So from my viewpoint, I am not seeing a change in how consumers are responding to the calls. Our conversion of right party contacts is the same, if not better. I am seeing, though, the biggest issue is the drop in right party contacts. It's easier and easier to screen your calls. It's easier and easier for messages to go to spam in somebody's inbox via email. So right party contact is the challenge, not convincing people to pay. At least that's what I have seen. In the old days, when I started in collections, all the phones were bolted to the wall. You make 100 calls, you could get 20, 25 right party contacts because someone in the house was yelling, would somebody get that? And now you get a call on your smartphone, you see a toll-free number you don't know, you swipe right, don't take the call, you turn your phone down. Or worse yet, you make calls and the magic number, I don't know if it's 12, 20, 50. People at AT&T all flag that call as spam. Now, everyone on the AT&T carrier sees probable spam when you call. And it's only going to get worse. Apple is putting out iOS 26 that's going to have an automatic call screening feature built into it. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but it's going to get harder and harder to reach people with a legitimate purpose because we're getting lumped in with all the timeshare cells.
Yeah, Blair's absolutely right. What we've seen is an increase actually in conversion because the right party contact is so elusive that it becomes the motivated consumers that are actually answering the phones, the ones that want to resolve something or do something or have something to say. I mean, it could be, here's my bankruptcy attorney, but the reality of it is the majority of them that are answering have something to do. So what's going to shift and where the collector's mentality, and I think this is the difference between AI and where an agent comes in, and we can talk about it in a little bit, but the difference is how likely are you to get more cash out of that conversion versus letting the debtor or the consumer or the creditor or the person dictate the terms of that dollar amount.
Yeah, and I would say from the agent side of it, right? Because a lot of our software dealing with the performance, the motivation, the kudos, things that you have to do to make sure that the agent is trained appropriately and having those right-sized conversations. They need to be even more empathetic nowadays, right? Into getting those conversations. They're dealing with nothing but 911 calls in a sense because they're very emotional, they're very complex. The easy one-to-one types of use cases, like you said before, you're more likely to get out of it from a human-to-human interaction than you are from the AI or automation side. But when you're constantly dealing with that high level of empathetic conversations, you get burnt out collectors. I'm sure you guys are dealing with that on a regular basis, right? Either they're not performing as well as they used to, they're not learning as effectively, right? So you want to keep things positive and learning on a personalized nature so that they're applying everything that they can from the calls that they are. The frontline managers are then coaching them appropriately, whether leveraging AI to coach them or not. They still need to be up leveled and skilled appropriately to handle those conversations. And I think another good segue into a conversation too is the traditional performance metrics that we talk about, right? The average handle times, those types of things that's kind of out the window at this point, right? Because if you're looking at it, you should be, because you're not, if you're dealing with longer types of conversations, you're not reading from a script, you're not responding. Those are short average handle times, right? So they may not reflect the consumer interaction as much as they are specifically, but I think that's a good topic for conversation because the traditional performance metrics, regardless of what they are and how you get there, need to be reevaluated at some point.
So do you mind if I jump in? Because you brought up like 3 awesome points.
Please.
So I worked in some hellscape collection agencies before I opened my own agency. And I have the benefit of 2020 vision of how not to treat your collection staff, how not to engage them. Because the last company I worked at, everyone was jacked into the matrix on their predictive dialer, and they were only using 5% of their brain. Sure. So one of the things I tried to do when I started my agency is build a different environment. Now, I'm crazy, and you're all going to think I'm crazy by the way I did it, but software companies work on agile management, and they use a Scrum, where everybody is first among equals. You're the project manager for X, everyone answers to you, but other person could be the project manager for Y, everyone answers to them. So you're managing processes, not people. And you work with grown-ups with opposable thumbs who can manage themselves. So you're not, hey, you took too long a break between calls, your wrap-up times. No, that's out the window. Yep. So what I did is I built on an agile management structure, and I took all my collectors and said, what would you like to be in charge of? So I have one person in charge of credit bureau disputes. I have one person who's the point of contact for client X, and they report to the company on a company-wide basis every week. Here's our liquidation. Here's our challenges. So you engage the rest of their brain. Yep. The other thing you can do in a Scrum environment, a Scrum is traditionally in software, people stand together for 10 minutes at the beginning of the day. What are your problems? What are your solutions? Now that we went through a couple versions of it. So now we have an inter-office chat program through our 6 branches, and we have a Scrum channel, and somebody will say, I have this problem with this consumer, and the collectors are answering it. There's no middle management. Somebody will say, oh, I ran into that last week. Here's how I handle it. So you start sharing expertise. But the super secret is you're engaging the staff. They actually care about results. And then at the end of the month, we have what's called an end of sprint retrospective in the tech world, where we take the month and go, okay, everybody, we get everybody on a call. What went right? What went wrong? What can we do better? And all it takes is a collector saying, yeah, client X, oh my God, they want weekly conference calls and the revenue isn't there. And 30% of the files are listed in error. And you turn to the collector and say, so we should fire that client. Yeah. And we fire that client, and suddenly all your collectors are rallied behind you saying, we're all working towards the same goal. And that reduces turnover, which is expensive. It reduces burnout because repetition burns people out. Collectors spend 80% of their day wrong numbers, broken promises, people yelling at them, and they lose track of the positives. So if you can get them to focus on the positives, going, yep, we got a new, you go to the staff on a company-wide basis. Hey, we have this client onboarding. Who wants to work it? And 8 hands shoot up. I want to work it. Everyone feels engaged. So you can fight those problems by building a different environment if you can.
Yep. And I'll say, just from Centrical's software perspective, right? That's where we've focused for the better part of 10 years, right? It was around the culture, it was around the motivation, it was around the kudos, it was around the sharing of best practices that now we can do even better because we can leverage AI to have personalized learning paths, specifically on, the individualized, either they have a knowledge gap or performance data that can allow us to help them coach better. The managers can take a look at that and start to use their own AI assistants so they can coach them specifically. And then how you actually apply it to the individualized agents can be dependent on how they learn. Is it bite-sized micro learning? Is it intelligent coaching that's specifically targeted based on their skills deficiencies?
Oh, that's
based
good.
around data. Yeah.
Do you have a way to add in, like, one of the KPIs we use? We have a monthly scorecard for our staff. And one of the things we reward them for is, did you get us a 5-star Google review, that named you? And we are up to, like, if you look at most collection agencies and you look at their Google reviews, it's a blasted wasteland of 1-star reviews. We're sitting at over 600 reviews, and we're running a 4.3-star rating. And Megan was patient with me. She worked with me. It was great to deal with her. So we reward them for that. And it has a knock-on effect because debtors get a call from us and go, oh, this is scary. And then they Google us. Oh, they're not monsters. And they're more willing to pay. And clients see that because we're protecting their brand reputation. And we get calls out of the blue. I want you to be my agency, like big household names, because they're doing their research and we're not knuckle-dragging goons.
Blair, that's a good point. We at Lendly, we did kind of a similar thing with Trustpilot that you did with Google. And we are a subprime lender that plays in the 220 plus APR rate. And so you would think that our product is not very well liked. Well, we've got 7,700 Trustpilot reviews with a 4.8 review, and 1 out of every 4 mentions the agent by name specifically. And I think that that's a huge kudos to kind of that culture that you're doing, Blair, and Mike, what you're training to, et cetera. That creates accountability, that kind of puts the compliance back on the collector. Say, look, if I'm going to give my name, I'm going to push a review and I'm going to push this behavior. It's going to help me with conversion. It's going to help me with customer satisfaction. It's going to help me with the right party content that was, again, so elusive to begin with.
And if you do get a 1-star review, you respond to it so the consumer feels heard, even if the consumer is right or wrong, doesn't matter. And then you audit that call and you train that collector going, okay, here's where everything went sideways. Here's what you could do in future. And sometimes, well, there's nothing you could have done. They were, they had outside stresses and pressures and you handled it right, but they lost their cool. Or it could be, you use these keywords and it kind of, that's where you get into what Mike was saying about the complexity of handling a call. It could be a choice of words that sends everything south.
Correct. And
sorry, Mike. When I first started back in when there were rotary phones on the desk, I always took a lot of pride because there wasn't Trustpilot, there wasn't Google, there wasn't any of that stuff. But I always took a lot of pride when that consumer at the end of a collection call, after I took their $1,000 or however much money I collected, when the consumer said thank you to me for taking their money, that's when I knew I did a good job. And I think that same behavior exists today. It's just different, and it's balanced and pushed more by technology.
Or Josh, did you get Christmas cards with post-dated checks inside them and a little thank you note? That's how I've translated it to Google reviews. Let's get a thank you out of them for treating them decently.
And like I said, from our software's aspect, the ability to gamify a lot of things too, make it fun and competitive amongst the different types of agents so that they're trying to get certain things done. They're learning certain ways. They get kudos for what they're doing. It's all about performance management, right, at that level, and making sure that the employee is engaged as possible. And not everybody's learning path is exactly the same. So leveraging our platform, but just leveraging personalized learning from AI in general allows you to be much more targeted in terms of what that person really needs. And then creating a culture of positivity in a business that's very, very difficult to do is how you start to show that customer experience that you're trying to provide through it, right? If you build it around your people, you train them the right way, they feel comfortable and confident, and they realize that they're making a difference in what they're doing. And if you can apply that to reviews on a public perspective, whether it's G2 or Trustworthy, whatever it is, that's a great way of winning on both sides. The business wins from a review perspective, and the agent feels like they're making an actual impact to what they're doing outside of their day-to-day job, which is becoming more and more difficult as we speak.
Now, the other thing we do to create an environment of positivity, some of our clients, our small to medium clients mostly, our CMS is set up that every time a collector enters a payment, it emails the client. We just got you $500. We just got you $1,000. And it lists the collector's name, phone number, and email address.
Yep.
So they're getting a self-generated kudos from our software every time they get a payment. And some of our big clients have come on and new credit manager, I want to know everything. Okay, I'll turn this on. And within an hour, shut it off, shut it off. Oh my God, I don't need 80 emails a day. But for the small and medium clients, it elevates the collector by giving them credit for where they've done work. It gets the collector's names known to the creditors, which is huge. And the collectors see that that's happening. And they'll get an email back from the client. Wow, nice payment. You've had that file for 2 years and you finally cracked it. Like that is huge. So, absolutely, you have to positive reinforcement. You have to emphasize you did this right. You got us a Google review. You got us a payment. You got us, you helped solve a problem. You managed a project and increased the liquidation. And you don't blame people when things go wrong. You go, okay, you got a 1-star review on Google. What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? There's no blame. We're going to talk about it. And sometimes it's, it was a full moon out. There's nothing you could have done. Or it could be, let's use these keywords going forward, or, let's try this strategy with this client and see if it works.
All right, let me just hit the pause button briefly on the conversation. Got a lot more to talk about, but first I wanted to make sure to talk a little bit about Centrical. Centrical enables leading brands to dramatically improve customer experience and business results by empowering frontline employees and their managers with AI-powered performance management and engagement solutions at scale. The platform keeps employees aligned with personalized goal and real-time visibility into progress, guides their growth and development through personalized micro-learning and AI-powered coaching and quality evaluations, and boosts engagement through gamification, real-time feedback, recognition, and rewards. You can learn more by visiting them online at centrical.com or just click on the link I dropped in the chat. So thanks again to Centrical for sponsoring today's webinar. Okay, so let's...
I've kind of segued into a segue there.
I've got a bunch of follow-ups, but just to kind of, let me throw this out as a, to kind of jumpstart the discussion again. We've talked a little bit about AI. It's come up a couple of times, and it was just in the company description I read. So let's look at AI. We've talked a little bit about sort of the impact in terms of the low-hanging fruit, how how it's sort of taking away from collectors, leading collectors to handle more complicated tasks. So obviously that's, and we've talked a little bit about how that's impacting their performance and, burning out faster. So how do you manage that? How do you sort of still throw AI out there because it's cheap, it's efficient, it's easy, it never has to go to the bathroom, but at the still, while it's, but it's taking some of those low, easier to handle calls away from the collectors, meaning collectors know that when they come in every day, it's going to be a grind, and that's only probably going to increase as the technology becomes more prevalent and becomes better and gets better training. How do you address and keep your, you talked a little bit, Blair, about some of the ideas you've had and sort of, assigning different tasks, but what are some other ways that collection operations can keep, their contact center agents and their collectors engaged, motivated, as they see AI take on more and more of a dominating role in interacting with consumers?
Okay, so there are two ways. Well, AI is a key buzzword that covers a lot of things. So we use AI in two different ways. One, we have a predictive analytics score that we built into our CMS, which is a primitive version of AI that gauges the percentage or odds of a file paid. And we use it as a coaching tool on each file that comes up. So say you have a client that liquidates 30%. Well, you have a baseline 30% odds of every single file paid. But files without phone numbers have a lower chance. Files with phone numbers have a higher chance. People with a date of birth under the age of 22 have a 50% more chance. If somebody has made a partial payment last week, they're more likely to pay. If someone has said, burn in heck, you rat bastard, the odds drop, astronomically. And of course, there's a law of diminishing returns. Every time you call and leave a message, the odds of that file go down. But as soon as someone calls back and engages with you, the odds go up. So we have a primitive form of AI. I would call that a primitive form of AI guiding us on files. And when we get a large batch of 30,000 files from a client, we'll score those files with that predictive AI and say, everything this watermark and up is worth a human being. Everything this watermark and down, let's use email or SMS. And if we get engagement from the consumer, let's move that to a human being. On the other side, we're working on outbound voice AI, which is a voice bot calling, this is Hal. The IT people thought I was kidding. I wasn't. This is Hal calling from Kingstone Data Credit in regards to this debt. How would you like to handle this? Now, some of the regulations up in Canada, a couple of the provinces are like, you use AI, we'll come and tear up your license. Some of the provinces are go for it. We wholly support it. So we're running a couple test cases right now, and I'm finding, if they're on a test program that liquidates 20% with a human being, it's liquidating about 10% with an AI bot, because like Mike said, it's easier to break a promise or hang up on an AI bot. You're not worried about hurting anyone's feelings, but you could put low balance accounts or low odds accounts with the AI bot, because we're never going to replace human beings. At least not with AI the way it exists. When Skynet's launched and all the murder bots are out there, maybe it's different. But for now, you can use those AI bots to supplement your staff and take care of the files that might not be profitable or reasonable or worth a human being's set of eyes.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of embracing AI, especially on inbound and outbound call flows. I want to see the conversational AI really, really increase and see what it can do, because I think that for agencies, it then might shift the structure of the company to allow individuals that have been with the agency, that are collectors by nature, but might morph into a different position, or might be able to get a better career out of it because now they're going. When I first started, the one thing we wanted to do is we worked the 8 to 5 grind, 40 calls an hour, 15 during skip trace time, in hopes that I get promoted to a supervisor. And then when I run a little unit, I hope that I get promoted to a manager. I don't know if that exists anymore. Do we have that career path, and can that be re-engaged through different ways to embrace AI as an agent and allow these agents to have a different career path? And I like some of the things that Blair said about what he's doing about engagement and accountability and allowing his agents to kind of have more skin in the game, so to speak. Yeah. I also like the concept of changing the comp structure. I think bonuses are antiquated. I've never been I owned an agency in 2004 and I hated bonus programs. I've hated bonus programs because there's always a collector who's going to find a way around it, find the easy way to do it, snake an inbound call, complain about ownership, whatever. I mean, there's something that's going to be inherently existing in a bonus structure that somebody's going to, especially a collector, find a way around it. AI eliminates that. So why not embrace it and figure out how we can change the comp structure, change a career path, change the mentality to come in and say, I want to build an organization, not just my little 350 account queue.
Yeah. And I think we always talk about this here at Centrical, the future of work, like what's next, right? And it's really that combination of AI and humans. It's the hybrid workforce. It's the augmented workforce, right? What you're doing is supplementing what they're using. If you look on any CV, I could talk about it from a marketing perspective, or I could talk about from a collections aspect. The skill sets are no longer going to be Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Word. It's going to be, how are you leveraging AI in different ways, shapes, or forms to be more effective, right? It's how are you going to supplement and be more efficient. But in terms of how you're going to kind of prioritize the collector's career path, and Josh, I love how you got into that, because I think providing pathways for growth and skill enhancement really does foster that satisfaction and even the long-term commitment, right? Because there's always going to be high attrition in this type of environment inside of the contact center, inside of collections overall. So the more you can kind of provide that career development path, they're going to see the value in what they're providing. But in order to do that, you also have to provide the performance link. Like, what is the direct correlation between how the agent's performing, their ability to, effectively engage those consumers and then still achieve those collection goals? And by the way, we're going to invest in you in how we're going to do that. We're going to train you appropriately. We're going to give you guys a personalized path, leveraging AI to understand the different types of tones you're using in certain calls or the words you're using in different types of conversations. That just inspires an entire different type of culture, which will not only help the bottom line, it'll also help the different types of agents that you're trying to hire. And you won't have to lose that tribal knowledge that's inherently inside of these agents that you don't want to lose to promotion in a sense, or attrition.
And that's a good point. Agents or staff members in general should be able to choose their own path. I have one lady, she was our second employee. She's been with us 14 years. She would rather cut off her arm than go to an in-person conference. That's not her gig. But I have other staff that, when a national conference comes up, send me. I'm like, sure, off you go. So a lot of people can pick their own path, and you've got to support them, and you've got to give them opportunities. Like, you shouldn't have LinkedIn locked down at your work and oh God, they might look for another job. No, you want to build an environment where people don't want to leave because you treat them well. And there's so many ways to do that. But if you invest in them and you show that you're invested in them and you give them a shout out on LinkedIn that they can see to their clients and their colleagues, that buys loyalty. That buys buy-in, because they're not going to get that in another environment.
I like that concept, buying loyalty.
That came out wrong. That sounds too mercenary.
No, I mean I think it's an image that resonates with a lot of people. But Josh, to your point about sort of the compensation structure, is it more about that? If it's not. I'm trying to. I've kind of got a question here in my head. How it's sort of lining up in my head is, if you've got people who don't want to move up the career, the corporate ladder, you've got people who kind of want to do different things. It's not the same path that it's always been. How do you sort of do that in a at scale? If you get to a certain size, you kind of it seems like it's the org chart doesn't seem to sort of, kind of go one step at a time. It'll go different places and in different ways. How do you sort of manage that? If you get, if you're of any size, more than say a handful of employees, in terms of kind of keeping track of who's going where and where they want to go and why they want to go and how to do it.
Yeah, I think Mike kind of hit it on a little bit. To create a career path, you have to give education to your employees. Number one. So how is your education path internally to allow for alternate jobs or alternate discoveries of what your staff looks like and what they want out of life? Number two, you have to surround yourself with good people. If you don't have good managers, middle-level managers, and I hate the word managers. If you don't have leaders in your organization that can understand that, hey, I'm not here to drive this specific behavior today. I want the specific behavior that's going to allow for tomorrow and the next week and the next month for you to continue not just to be successful, but to grow within our culture. And a good leader can identify those individuals and point them in the right direction. You should go try this position. Or, you know what? I'm glad you're a worker bee. I'm glad you love the phones. Why don't you sit next to me and help me enhance somebody else that wants to do that? There's all these things that you can buy, and buy that loyalty, buy that engagement, just by being a good leader. So if you don't surround yourself with good leaders, and you just got middle managers or managers that are kind of just managing and saying, well, you're not hitting this KPI, you're not hitting this metric, and browbeating them like it used to be back in the day, it's not going to work. And you cannot have an agency at scale, because then you're going to deal with some major turnover issues. And I don't know if we've gotten into it. Well, we haven't, but I know we talked about it amongst ourselves before. But the opportunity cost of losing a tenured agent is ridiculous.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Number one, you've got all your time that you spent training them. But then if you got a collector that's spinning off $12,000 to $15,000 net revenue per month, it takes a good 6 to 9 months for somebody to build a portfolio to get to that kind of fee numbers. So there is a ton of opportunity lost when you lose that collector if you haven't led them correctly, engaged them correctly.
And the time suck of the other people that you have to pull away for the training and the onboarding and the integration. You're absolutely right. Turnover, people are not an expendable resource like they used to be. and they shouldn't be. And I'm going to take back buying loyalty. That was the wrong wording. It's like business karma. It's like social karma, but in business. You offer up what you can to help people, and it'll come back to you tenfold. That sounds less mercenary. What we do, talking about building your own path. So, and Mike's probably going to love this because he probably has it already built into his software. We do a monthly scorecard for people, and it's got the standard KPIs. What percentage of your salary to revenue did you generate? But it downplays traditional KPIs. It says, okay, we're looking for an average of 100 calls a day for the month. And somebody might come in at 80, but they had a ton of inbound calls, so that positive score offsets the negative score, so we don't care. Somebody got 5 Google reviews, landed 2 clients, those clients generated revenue. Now they've built themselves a hybrid environment where they're kind of sales and kind of collections, but everyone's measured by the same metrics. So a collector / salesperson is measured on the same scoring metric as a salesperson, is measured on the same metric as an IT person. And so everyone's being held to the, and you assign values. So you have an IT person, when everything's breaking, what are they doing? Well, they're trying to put it back together. When everything's working, oh, they're just goofing off. No, they're doing all the proactive work to keep things from breaking. So you reward scores or values for every task that's done. You have a client that you have to have a weekly conference call with, and you send your project manager, and they've got to spend an hour a week talking to this client. Well, that should be given a score, and they should be able to log it. And again, that gives you engagement because the staff that are doing non-collection things see value returned to them. Well, I got this Google review. I helped calm this client down. I built this stair-step report and sent it off and made them happy. You can give them a holistic score that says you got a positive score. You're 2 months away from getting a raise, and it's totally out of our hands. It's objective, not subjective.
Yeah, I think, Josh, you hit a really good point too. I think in any career development, you're also taking probably your best performing agents and you're putting them into leadership positions, which they haven't been properly trained for. They're becoming more of a manager at that level where they know how to do the job. Now they have to teach other people how to do the job. And if you just give them a dashboard to go by that just doesn't give them a lot of merit around it, you're not providing the training and the career development that they necessarily need in order to be that leader. You can see it as a personality trait, most likely, and that's why you put them up, but it's mostly on individualized performance, right? That's why some of the best players in sports don't necessarily come on coaches. So at some point when you find those leaders, what you want to be able to provide them, and what Centrical does a really, really good job of, is also the training around the manager perspective, the leadership perspective of how they can manage their team, the dashboard that you can leverage in different types of KPIs, the engagement scores that their agents are doing on a learning perspective. What are they engaging in? Are they looking at that piece of information you sent them, pulling from your LMS system? So it's a really good aggregation of different points of data that you can sit into an environment that makes it it makes it fun, it makes it engaging, it allows the manager to do a better job, which inherently allows the agent to do a better job. But you always want to make sure you're setting up your frontline, I'm going to steal that from you, leader, to do the right job and to do it very efficiently. And we could go into an hour of how AI helps them to do that. But let's just, in general, you want to make sure you're setting them up for success so that it trickles down to everything else underneath.
And also to Mike's point, positive reinforcement to your leaders that they're not running around banging on desks. You didn't make enough calls. Well, managers can make or break someone's employment experience. And if you allow that negativity, you will have turnover because no one wants to be yelled at. That's not, if you teach your leaders to give them, praise publicly, critique privately, constructive conversations. It's not about blame. It's about, improving things. All those things, there's a software company called Valve. And they did the Fallout game, and they had an employment manual, and it was brilliant. It had a whole page in their manual going, what if I screw up? And the page is, well, did you burn the office down? Did you lose all our clients? No, then it was a learning experience. Let's just make things better going forward. Building that kind of mentality into your leaders, that's important.
Yep. And I think it's an old adage, but it's true. They always say people, agents, whatever, they don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? It's the people you're reporting into. So if they're not providing the right experience for them, and if that manager can't provide the personalized nature of what that training should be, where the areas they should improve on, where's the context and the learning that you can bring into that path, not only for their own career development, but just for the benefit of the business, that solves a lot of the emotional aspect of like, how do I coach them specifically when you can provide that based on the myriad of data you have from all the calls they make, the emails they send, and the content you create, putting that all into a dashboard that's engaging. It helps the frontline leader so much more in maintaining that culture that you need to drive, especially in an area like collections, which is such a niche area, and how you have to have those conversations. It's a skill set, it really is.
Because it's a weird golf bag of skills that makes a good collector. Absolutely.
100%.
For managers, then it's not just about optimizing the performance of the people who are reporting up to them. If I'm hearing everybody correctly, that's part of it, maybe a big part of it, but it's also about, getting to know the people well enough that sort of what they're, and working out a career path for them, that you're allowing them to succeed into to a point where they can follow those steps, correct?
Partially, yeah. Now, I'm doing things on a weird agile management structure, so I don't have anyone that manages people. They manage processes. So, and everyone's leading by example. I have no middle management. So like my operations, my oversight manager of operations who does compliance and complaints and escalations, she's still collecting. Not as much as somebody full-time collecting, but she's still collecting and leading by example. We have site managers for our different offices. They manage, did the office burn down? Do we have enough coffee in the office? Being a chief morale officer, and they don't approve vacation. People can take vacation whenever they want. They just have to be responsible to make sure critical things are covered while they're gone. So I run a very weird environment that way. But managers, leaders in your company should be in working on gaining additional engagement, making sure people are happy. Somebody comes in and they've suddenly disengaged from work and their production has gone down. Something's happened at home. They're suddenly disengaged with work. You got to notice that and reach out to that person. You can't, obviously, what's going on at home? You can't do that, but are you okay? Is there anything I can do? And, if they open up and, yeah, client X really has me down. Okay, well, let's try a change. Yeah. You're a valued person. Let's not just bang your head against a wall. If you're not enjoying your job, let's talk about why, and maybe we can do something about it.
Yep. And I always kind of look at like what are like really big, impactful levers that anything you should put into it from a software perspective. But imagine if you could just do this. If you could early see at-risk identification. So who's at risk, who's burning out, who's not performing to the level that they need to. You're accelerating your onboarding because the content you're providing them and everything around it's always been managed and specifically to them. You make sure that your performance is transparent. So they see the performance that's there. They know what their goals are. They know what they're trying to achieve. They have a goalpost in front of them that's not constantly moving. Then you can coach them consistently on how to get to that goalpost. And then I think the last part, which is also one of the easiest things for any operations to implement, it's the wins and visibility. Give them kudos. Show them the improvement in goal transparency to build up that morale and the engagement. That's such an easy thing that I think we've forgotten in this world of technology, that whether the technology is allowing you to promote that better in terms of the different types of kudos and calling people out for really, really good things and positive experiences and what they've done and try and replicate that from a best practices aspect. If you could implement that as a part of culture, leveraging software because it has all the information around it, that's going to change your culture tremendously overnight, just because they're going to be more willing to go the extra mile because they're getting kudos. Everyone likes a pat on the back. That's the way
Absolutely. It's well, Josh brought up a good point about commissions. So obviously I work in a collection environment where we do give personal commissions. But one of the things, to Josh's point, we are very transparent about our every day we send out a company-wide report and we report by branch. Here's the overhead for the branch. Here's the revenue. Here's whether we're ahead or behind target. And if we're ahead or behind our break even. And when a branch is profitable at the end of the month, we take 10% of the profits and share it pro rata with everybody in the company, in that branch. So the IT people get a bonus. So they get rewarded for keeping the lights on and the computers running. And the 1-star collector you have, rather than creating resentment, they're cheering that person on because they're having a fundamental bottom line effect on everybody in that branch. And likewise, you have the new staff member that's being onboarded. Well, every dollar they collect counts. If they even just cover their base costs, everyone's happy. By being transparent about financial goals and company-wide goals,
Yep.
you can create an environment of positivity because you can see them. You can show people they're working towards those goals.
Yeah, and you had a really good point. There's one aspect of this that we haven't talked about yet that's extremely vital, and that's the strategy to execution piece, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about is the agents, frontline managers, and how you're doing. But how does that roll up? How does that align to the executives, for example, in terms of like what your business goals are, and how is that affecting the business in terms of the roll down from it? Because there's always that game of telephone, but can get very lost when everyone's in the trenches every day taking grenades, as I always say, right? There's things they're dealing with on a regular basis at home. They're dealing with different types of conversations, which are now more and more complex, and you need to be more empathetic. All of which, well, you need to perform at a high rate. But how's that changing the business? How is that helping everyone else? And that connection between the two, I think, is paramount in terms of not only being motivated and more engaged to do your job, but also seeing the result outside of just the kudos on the end of the back. If the business does well, you will financially will do well from a motivation perspective. Maybe comp structures change. If you help the business grow, they'll help you grow from a career path perspective.
Yeah. One of the things we rolled out, so in Canada, there's a lot more openness about what you can communicate. And we use SMS heavily in Canada, and we don't have to worry about a chain of consent. Canada has the Canada anti-spam legislation that says if you're trying to collect a debt, you have permission. Period. The end. So we rolled out a new program that builds an API, that builds a customized link that they click on it, and it's a request for an Interac e-transfer. It's like like a Venmo pull rather than a push. And we saw huge success with that. And we reported at the end of the month, hey, we're running 10,000 texts a day. We're getting 40 payments a day. We're getting a 0.4% liquidation lift per day. Here's what it costs us. Here's this is the revenue that everybody got. Now that we've got that, we shared that as we experimented with it. We handed it off to a project manager, and every day on the interoffice chat, I'm going to run a batch of 14,000 texts. Who wants them sent as them? And 20 hands go up. Yeah, I bet. That's engagement. And it's trying a new tool, sharing the costs and the benefits, and showing. And this is part of what leaders, managers need to do. They need to not just go, I need this, I need that. They need to show, hey, we did this thing last month. It had this impact. It caused this. We landed a major client because of the Google reviews. And they called us out of the blue and go, do you know who we are? I'm like, oh my God, everybody knows who you are. But they became our client because of our Google reviews. So we went back to the staff and said, you know how we asked for Google reviews? You guys got us this client. It wasn't a sales guy. It wasn't somebody kissing babies and shaking hands at a conference. This was solely you. And telling that story of how they caused that success for the company means the world.
Yep, completely agree.
We did get a comment that came in, so I'll share this with the group, but also use this as an opportunity to remind everybody, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, send it in through the Q&A. The comment that came in was, our managers have started having one-on-one conversations outside or off the operations floor with the agents about who they are and what do they want from them or us, trying to make more of a personal connection. I think that just reinforces everything we've been talking about so far.
Yeah. If you're going to give people guidance, you can make general, like you can praise people publicly, criticize privately, build them privately. You can't go out on the floor and say, I need everyone to make more calls. Well, half the people are going to think, well, that doesn't apply to me. And the other half are going to be offended. I make lots of calls. What the hell? What you can do is you can pull someone aside and say, okay, I see you're making, 60 calls a day instead of 100. I see you're really slow to go. You start at 8:30. Your calls don't really start till 10. Do you have a time suck? Something, dragging you down? Like, are you getting bombarded with emails? What are you doing? And you can have a conversation with that collector. And I got to build this stupid report for this client. It takes me 3 hours. Oh, well, we can teach you to do this faster in Excel. You need Excel training, not being beaten up over, your call count. We just need to identify that time suck, move it to someone who knows better, train that person to do it more efficiently, or go back to the client and going, what are you doing? You're hurting your bottom line. Stop asking us for stuff. Like, it could be any, or a combination of all three, but you need to have those conversations one-on-one. You can't You can't, yeah. Now, after you have that conversation one-on-one, you could then have a floor-wide conversation going, okay, so we've identified 3 staff members here are having this huge time suck with stupid Excel requests, from clients. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell our IT people to automate these reports. It's going to take us a week or 2, and we're going to free you guys up about 10 hours a week as a team. That's huge. If you tell that story, now everyone's like, oh, that's great. They're taking stuff off our plate. They're not punishing me. They're not isolating me from it. They identified a problem and they're helping me with
it. Okay, let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the definition for collector well-being. I'm curious, how you've seen that definition change maybe over the years and how you would define it now. If you were going to sort of, if someone came up to you and says, what does collector well-being mean to you? How would you answer that question?
Well, collector well-being is work-life balance. It's their overall happiness with work. It's their engagement. Like if they've shut off their brain and they're just punching a clock and showing up, you don't have collector well-being. To me, collector well-being means the world. Staff turnover is expensive. It's costly. You cannot grow your organization if you have people leaving. And if people are leaving, it's just a symptom that you're doing something terribly wrong. Are you paying below market rate for wages? Are you demeaning them at work and they go home and they feel worthless? Are you dragging them over the coals every time they want a day off? All that adds up to collector well-being. What we do, so first of all, I think I mentioned earlier, no one has to ask permission to take a day off. They have a certain amount of vacation time. They decide when they take time off. We have a core schedule. We let our staff flex their schedule. They want to work late 2 extra nights a week and leave at noon on Friday. Couldn't care less. So they can juggle their work-life balance. In Canada, we give staff paid holidays. We give them paid time off for sick days. It's legislated up here. So, when we opened our office in Largo, we said, okay, so you're going to get 10 paid holidays a year, 5 paid sick days, because I'm not going to treat you differently than my staff in British Columbia. They looked at me like I had 5 heads, because that's not a thing. By doing that, we get well-being. If we see somebody, if we have a Scrum channel where they can go, this stupid thing keeps happening, the database does this, listening to them, even if you can't solve their problem today, that creates well-being. And if a staff member is pulling away or disengaging or suddenly, has the open to work flag on LinkedIn, you can talk to them and go, is everything okay? And they might be, well, my spouse is moving. I'm looking for another job because I won't be near your office. Oh, would you like a fully remote position? You're really valued here. Let's talk about what we can do to accommodate you. All those things can play into well-being. But well-being is you're not burning out your staff. You're not treating them poorly. You're not trying to get another 2% out of them now, but you're going to lose them in 6 months. It's that business karma thing. During the pandemic, we got locked down up here in Canada. Everyone went fully remote. It was a bit of a culture shift. We went from fully in office to fully remote. We had people logged in at 10 o'clock at night, and on the chat, I'm like, what are you doing? Get off, go watch the rest of Netflix, do something else. But we were trying to get people to balance their lives. And when things opened back up again, we allowed a hybrid work environment. I'm not sure if that's a viable thing in the States overall, but our staff that are doing well, we only require them to be in the office X days a month. They can pick which days. So if they've got, picking up their kids from school or, a doctor's appointment or whatever, they can build their lives around their work easily. Work doesn't dominate all their life choices.
I'm going to take a little
Does that help?
I'm going to take a little counterpoint. I'm not going to define collector well-being. Each collector is different. Each individual is different. It's not for me to say how Mike's feeling versus how Blair's feeling, and what I can do to influence Mike is going to be completely different than what I'm going to do to influence Blair. So for me, the easiest way to define well-being is in metrics. What metrics can you look at? If your turnover rate's high, you probably have a well-being issue. If you've got low collection efforts, you probably have a well-being issue. If you have the inability to distinguish between will versus skill, you have a well-being issue. You've got a leadership issue. You've got things that will come out in numbers. And I think the easiest way for you to define if you've got a well-being issue is look at the numbers, period. It'll tell you right then and there what simply, and then now, do you have the leaders and the infrastructure to figure out how to fix those problems and change those metrics?
Okay, let's see here. Let's see. We've got a couple of minutes left. Do I have a quick question I can ask before we wrap up? Let me look at my notes here.
I got one, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I think if we were to close, obviously we've talked about the right party contact. We've talked about AI. We've kind of brought up some of these things that are kind of creating this paradigm shift in the agency world and in the collections environment in general. But if you could give advice to any specific agency owner, agency leader, agency manager, this one little nugget, what would that nugget be to say, here's how to navigate what we're experiencing today so your turnover isn't there, so your success is there, and that you're able to build an organization that supports what you're trying to do and accomplish?
Talk to your team. Don't think business as usual, sit in my ivory tower. Talk to your team. Your collectors, your frontline collectors are what run your business. If you ran a car factory plant for Ford and you couldn't build a car, you're a burden on the company. The people who build the car are the heart and soul of the factory. Go talk to the people who are doing the collections, find out what they want, what they find rewarding, what they find frustrating, and listen to them and make changes. You can't fix everything overnight, but if you listen to them, that's what will grow your company. That's what will get you the engagement. That's what will get you the business karma.
Yeah, I think with communication is huge, obviously, but I think even the ability to communicate the why from a leadership perspective. I always want to tell everybody that I work with, that works for me, that works in this organization, why are we doing something? You may not agree, but if you understand the why, maybe you'll see it my way. Maybe you'll see it the way the business wants to progress, or heaven forbid, you provide a completely different route that somebody didn't think of. And so, which would create engagement, which creates accountability. But to communicate and understand the why and to allow that to permeate throughout your entire culture, to me, is huge.
And I'll give you an example of how Centrical loves this part of our platform. We do voice of the employee, right? That's what we try to bring into the platform because it's a way to actively gather and analyze all the employee feedback so that we're improving the overall experience and the engagement. So we can do it a couple of ways. You can do it through like pulse surveys, micro surveys, other data sources. But if you can start to understand your employee sentiment, you're identifying some of those pain points that they're going through on a regular basis, and then assess the training effectiveness on what you need to help them along that way. It's a great way that the companies leverage our platform from a data perspective because they're getting firsthand account on the voice of the employee. What's wrong? What's not working correctly? Because you can only see so much through KPIs. That's what we always say, right? And nothing seems broken until the KPIs start to dip. But it's good to try and get out ahead of that because you're dealing with the actual performance aspect of the employee, the frontline agent, the frontline manager, so you can address it proactively. So we get a lot of great feedback on that because then not only can the frontline manager leverage that, but so can the business. They can understand at a high level what's working and what's not working, and then make holistic changes across the organization to address those things rather than in silos, which we all know is the hardest part of trying to solve an issue. When you're siloed and not spread across, you're not going to solve the larger issue.
And with that, the clock strikes the top of the hour. So yeah, unfortunately, we have run out of time. But Blair, Josh, Mike, on behalf of everybody who's watching and listening, including myself, thank you for being here and for sharing today. I think everyone's taking away some great ideas, some new things to try, but also sort of just a better understanding of what's going on with this dynamic and being aware of it. So thanks to each of you for being here today. Mike, I want to thank you and everybody at Centrical for sponsoring today's webinar. Everybody, please check them out, centrical.com. To those of you watching and listening, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for making us part of your day. It's always appreciated. If you're watching us live, we're back tomorrow with a webinar at 1 o'clock Eastern where we're talking about how to identify or easily identify the accounts that are most likely to pay. we pre-recorded this because ACA is coming up later this week, so I can already tell you that this conversation goes well beyond that. If you haven't signed up yet, there's a link in the chat. I highly encourage everyone to check it out. If not, you can always find a link on the events calendar at accountrecovery.net. We'd love to see you back for that tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.